तारू microphone. तारू microphone.
Okay, let's begin. Welcome, everyone. So, thank you so much for joining. And as you know, we are going to talk about basic photography. And I'm the presenter in this online session. My name is Sumit Dhupar. And let's just see what we have in the schedule. Okay, let me just give a brief introduction of myself. My name is Sumit Dhupar, and I consider myself as a professional photographer because I do take care about the technicalities and we can say that art also in when we do photography. So all these combinations I put in my photography work. If you have seen my portfolio, so you must have noticed that this what kind of artistic work I do, but I always take care about the technicality. So I make sure that when I'm going to discuss all these basic photographies, it's almost mostly about the camera settings and compositions. I'll give you enough information so you can feel comfortable when you're doing photography at the start. So just brief background, I'm doing photography since 2017 actively. I was having camera since 2011, and but it's 2017 March when I started all this doing kind of regular practice and learning more and more in depth about the camera settings and the compositions, what kind of photographies we have, we can nurture our skills. So mostly I like to do nature artwork, still life, food photography, product photography. And I like to do street photography also, where I got opportunity to capture portraits, expressions. So that's helped my skills to enhance in the portrait. I always give canvas art field in my work. So for practices, I like to do minimal artwork because it helps me to balance the composition. Macro work I'm doing, it helps me to gain my concentration level, improve on it. And as I said, street life photography I'm doing because I believe this is something which will help you to improve as if we can say the uh, complete photographer, where you will find all the opportunity. You have to fight with your fear, all these kind of things you get in the street photography. And I'm offering all these my photography services through my website sumitphotoworld.com, and photography workshop and courses I'm offering under SPW Expedition. So these are just my new ventures. I have SPW Photograph, Fine Art, Expedition, and my YouTube channel, Sumit Photo World. You can find my YouTube channel, and you will find something, some content which will be useful. You can share your feedback and what kind of content you want me to prepare for you. I can work on it based on your suggestions and advice. My professional we can say profile page handle is Sumit Photo World. So anywhere you can search me with the Sumit Photo World. Even on the Google, if you find search Sumit Photo World, you will find all the links to my profile available on the internet. So as I said, I have YouTube channel also. So in YouTube channel, I have my 3 playlists: SPW Lounge, SPW Expedition, and BTS. SPW BTS is something where I'm including all the background processing. There are some already there. So whenever I'm going to do my new project assignment, I'm going to prepare all these background, we can say the setup, technicalities, how I plan all those product shots or even the food photography. Expedition playlist. So I'm just putting all the video recordings from my workshop, which I do in the outdoor, even an online session, which I'm offering for basic photography. Every time I just plan to do it differently. So there will be, we can say that whole discussion will be quite different in all the videos. So you don't consider that it's all the topics I'm talking about. So every time my explanation bit different. So you will feel totally having a different experience in all the videos. SPW launch. This is something which I playlist I'm working on to share my experience with the post processing. I do post processing work using Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom. You can subscribe my channel. You can share your suggestions and feedback. It will help me to make more content on the YouTube. So this is the schedule for today's workshop. Session time will be 60 minutes. So I have just planned, this is a photography introduction. So I just squeeze this, we can say the total content. So I'll plan to complete it within 60 minutes. The full-fledged workshop, the online workshop I'm working on for basic photography, that will be something around 3 hours. So I'm still drafting the content. So it will going to be complete end-to-end for photography, from basic to some kind of intermediate level. You will learn on that, but that content is still in the preparing stage. I have Q&A session. So whenever we complete our today's session, you can just prepare your questions, what you want to discuss at the end, and I'll make sure I'll help you out. So whatever the queries you have. So there are just simple rules for this session. All participants allowed to ask questions. So that's a kind of rule that you are allowed to ask questions. So it'll be always good to have interactive sessions. Rather one-way talk may give you some bit of information. If you have counter questions, it'll help me to explain in more detail, and it'll help everyone. Participants video audio not allowed in webinar sessions. So this is something you should avoid. Without need, you should not unmute yourself. Just keep yourself mute. When you're required to speak, you can raise hand, you can ask questions, we can discuss a little about. And keep if you turn off the video, that it'll help you to get a better visual quality because of the internet. And you can keep add your questions in the chat box, or you can note down in your notepad. So whenever we have Q&A session at the end, we can discuss about all those questions. So this is our first topic, how DSLR camera works. So you can see the diagram here. So there are two diagrams, one DSLR diagram at the moment of shooting and one at the normal state when we see through the viewfinder. So if you see the diagram here carefully, so there is a line, it's a light traveling through the lenses. So it shows that how the light enters through the lenses. It has to pass through all the elements in the lens and reach that reflect mirror. So that reflect mirror is helping horizontal line makes vertical, so it can reach the pentaprism. That's the mechanism of DSLR we are talking about. So pentaprism, what is doing? It's just making that vertical light horizontal so it can pass through the viewfinder. That's how we see things through the viewfinder. So if you turn off LCD on your camera, you'll see through the viewfinder. But at the moment of shooting, the reflex mirror goes up and it'll allow light to reach the sensor. There's a red strip line at the end, you can see. This is a sensor camera where image getting recorded. So as soon as you click the shutter release button, it'll just keep, make that reflex mirror go on top, and it'll allow light reach the sensor and image will be recorded. So that's what explained in all this content. So you can always go through the video recording and you can see read through if you want. Now we'll just talk about mirrorless camera. How, because nowadays we are talking about mirrorless camera, so it's always good to have some we can say brief discussion about mirrorless camera. So the image is showing just the diagram of components. How the mirrorless camera having lesser components compared to DSLR. So you can see in the total components, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 components we have in the mirrorless camera. We have lens, we have shutter panel. The shutter panel is there, and we have image sensor at the end. And there is a new member in the components, electronic viewfinder. So this is what is we always talk about mirrorless camera. It's the electronic viewfinder which is making the major of the difference. So it's very simple. We can say that its mechanism is a lot simpler than the DSLR, and sensor is directly exposed to the light. So anytime you see through the mirrorless camera, it's light reaching the sensor directly. There is no reflex mirror. And this generates a live preview of the scene directly onto the electronic viewfinder. So anything you see through the viewfinder, it's going to capture the same. So there is not any preview button kind of, which we see in some of the DSLR device. There are preview buttons. So we'll see live preview through the viewfinder itself. So when shutter release button pressed, the door will then slide up, exposing the sensor to the light. After that, another door slides down to cover the sensor again, which stops exposure and complete the capture. This is the kind of theory how image getting recorded. So this is the whole process. It's a similar process we have in the DSLR and the same process we have in the mirrorless camera. Benefits of mirrorless camera. So there are a few benefits which we can say that when we talk about mirrorless camera, so most of the time we talk about the benefits, and they include these. So it's very compact because it is having smaller sensor compared to DSLR. So that's why the body will be quite compact, lightweight, and you can easily carry like a point and shoot camera. And electronic viewfinder, final image preview appears directly onto the image sensor, offering live preview, which then displays on the rear LCD. This image preview allows you to adjust settings like exposure, brightness, saturation, and contrast before taking your shot. So all these settings you can adjust right on the camera or before even taking your shot. So when you complete a capture, you will get what you see through the LCD. So that's how accurate it is. Image stabilization. So with lightweight, camera is less prone to shaking. So it's a lightweight body, so you can handle it. We can see for longer time compared to a DSLR. So, and when you are able to handle the camera for longer time, lightweight body, so definitely it'll improve your chances to get sharp images. There'll be, we can say the lesser, we can say the chance where you'll have some shake in your hands, which can introduce blur in your photo. Silent mechanism. Fewer moving parts inside the camera system also means less noise. So whenever we have less components inside the device, you will hear very less sound. So that's why it's a silent mechanism. Higher shooting speed. So with better focusing capabilities for contrast detection, a higher shutter speeds it gets, and mirrorless models makes it easier for photographers to capture at a faster rate. So that is something which very much improved. You must have heard about the burst mode. So when we press shutter release button continuously, it'll capture burst of images. In Nikon, it's a 10 photos default, so we can adjust. In Canon, I believe it's a 6 photos. So that's something improved in mirrorless camera. The average, we can say the output is really enhanced. For example, in Nikon device, out of 10 images, you expect somewhere around 6 images will be in good sharp quality. But in mirrorless camera, that average improved really. It will be like 8 or 9 images out of 10, something like that. So that's how it is improved, that higher shooting speed. Now we'll just talk about the key difference in both devices and why the other is leading. So we'll understand. Mirrorless cameras are more lightweight. So we have understood that why it's very lightweight. Mirrorless cameras offer real-time previews of exposure and contrast due to electronic viewfinder. That's again a benefit for that. Mirrorless cameras have shorter battery life due to EVS. So this is really critical because when you're going for outing, where you will not have an option to recharge or charge your batteries during a trip, so then you need to have a backup batteries. So at least a couple of batteries you should have when you're working on the mirrorless camera. And that is something getting drained very quickly. If you are continuously doing shooting, the mirrorless camera will really eat up your battery because of electronic viewfinder. Mirrorless cameras are costly, and budget DSLR will offer the entry-level photographer more value than a budget mirrorless camera. So because mirrorless camera new into the market, they are very costly. And if you compare the prices of any entry-level DSLR device to an entry-level mirrorless camera, you will find huge difference. And you can get this at the same cost of a mirrorless camera entry-level device. You can get somewhere around, we can say that more than entry-level device of a DSLR. So that's how the different it is. That's again in the favor of the DSLR. Mirrorless camera offer fewer accessories. They are still lacking in their selection of attachments and lens mounts. So this is something it's keep coming, improving, but because DSLR is, we can say that very much established, it's very old technology, and that's why there are more we can say that third parties or the other manufacturers which they keep develop their products to support the DSLR device, like Tamron, Sigma. So all these manufacturers keep introduce their accessories for these DSLR devices. Mirrorless cameras shoot faster, particularly when it comes to continuous shooting or a burst of images. So we have understood why it's a high shutter speed, high shooting speed is there on the mirrorless camera because of a sensor. Mirrorless camera offer more image stabilization. So lack of mirror mechanism. So reflex mirror we have understood in the DSLR means mirrorless camera offer more stabilization and less shaky photos. So we have understood why the stabilization has been improved in the DSLR mirrorless camera. Then lightweight is something which is very much involved, or we can say playing major role in that. Mirrorless cameras have smaller sensor size than the DSLR. So this is something we can say that DSLR is quite working well in low light situations because they have big sensors and they are really ideal for low light situations. But mirrorless cameras are less ideal for low light situation because of a smaller sensor. Mirrorless cameras have a less accurate autofocus system. So because this is something you need to understand very carefully, autofocus systems of mirrorless camera uses contrast detection rather than the phase detection. So what is that phase detection and contrast detection? We need to understand. So contrast detection is something which is supported by mirrorless device, and phase detection. Phase detection is something which helps a DSLR device to calculate the distance more accurately. So it measures the distance between the lens and the subject more accurately on the DSLR. So this is, we can say, the point which is really leading, which is the only reason I see here that it's a DSLR still leading. Now we'll just talk about the exposure triangle. So you must have heard this term exposure triangle a lot when we understand or read about the camera settings. So, for DSLR, we always read about all these: shutter speed, aperture, ISO. All these in total, we call it as a exposure triangle. So in definition, the exposure triangle comprise aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These three camera and lens controls work together to regulate the amount of light that makes it to the camera center. So how the light reaching the center sensor. So how light reaching the sensor, it's all controlled through these parameters or aspects of a DSLR device: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And aperture and shutter speed is just deciding that how much light will reach the sensor. So it's not doing anything. It's just controlling the amount of light reaching the sensor. But ISO is having its dedicated role of sensitivity of camera sensor. It's improving the sensitivity of a camera that it can sense more light even in a low light conditions. It can sense more light by improving or increasing the ISO. So we'll read all these about in details in upcoming slides. All these we can say that aspects we are going to discuss in details. So if you see this diagram, the ISO, if you see the arrow here, the higher the ISO, the brighter the image. And if you see here in the shutter speed, the lower the shutter speed, the brighter the image. And small f number, large aperture. So always keep this in mind. So what is large aperture, small aperture? So when we have large aperture, f2.8, image will be brighter. On f22, you can see the hole is very small. We call it as the lens eye, and the image will be darker. If the light condition is not good, you need to work with the small f number. Now we'll talk about shutter speed. As a definition, shutter speed is the length of time that the camera shutter remain open and allows the light to reach the camera sensor. Most of us call it as exposure time. So how we are capturing the photo with a long exposure, or we can say that short exposure. So exposure time, when we say, it's the amount of time we are allowing shutter to keep open. So that's a traditional term we talk, but and we can say the other technical terms, we call it as a shutter speed. So you can see some examples of shutter speed here, 1/4000. So it's a fraction of seconds to 1/1000. So this is the shutter speed which helps you freeze moving subject. So whenever you see something fast moving subject, you can freeze between the shutter speeds like this. For journal photos, general purpose photos, anywhere when you take a journal photos, you can have a shutter speed somewhere around 1/250 to 1/60. So it can capture still subjects where they are not doing so much movement, or they are doing slow movement. Like when people are if walking on the street at we can say the normal speed, like just walking, you can capture it at this 1/250 very easily. And now we'll talk about the long exposure. So when we say long exposure, so it'll be slow shutter speed. So anything between 1/2 to 1/30, consider as a long exposure. It can capture motion blur. So if anything moving consistently like a waterfall, you can capture it in between this shutter speed, and you will see that flow of the water is showing in the motion. So it gave a very milky effect on that water. When we can go to a very extreme long exposure kind of, so it'll be 2 seconds to 10 seconds. So when you see single digit on your camera settings for shutter speed, it'll be seconds. So consider this long exposure to paint with light, stars, fireworks, and to make river water as a glass. So when you are capturing a photo at high shutter speed, so it'll make the water like a glass. So if you're around that river, you can test your camera settings at this shutter speed, and you will see the effect. And for light painting also, I usually do personally somewhere around 15 seconds, because it'll allow more time to work with the subject. Depends on the size. So your light painting photography is very, we can say, in the limelight, or very much I see when I go through the social media posts on the Facebook, I see a lot of groups, their concentration is really on the light painting. So light painting, I'll just give you a hint that your shutter speed for light painting depends on the size of the subject. So how you are traveling the light from one end to other end, how you're covering their all the parts, and during that time it'll decide that how long the exposure will be for light painting. But it demands a lot of practice, very much practice on the light painting. So these are example photos for shutter speed. Left image on the left is captured at fast shutter speed. You can see that person walking is look quite static. Image on the right is captured at the slow shutter speed, where you can see that everything is static. So everything still is captured as static, but the person moving is captured as a blur. So that's what we can say, that you can have creative work with the slow shutter speed. If you're in the market, you can use this slow shutter speed and you will see a lot of creative results. So that's the dial button, how it is showing on the dial button. This is from the Nikon device, and speed values will be somewhere around somewhere between 30 seconds, as low as 30 seconds, or as high as 1/4000. So some devices nowadays supports 1/8000 also, the shutter speed, so it's too high. And when you change one shutter speed to other, when you move the wheel dial button, and you will see that shutter speed changing from one to other. So we call this as a one step. It could be increment one step, or you can say you can decrease the shutter speed by one step. So that's how the shutter speed you can control. And whenever you increase the shutter speed, we can say that half the amount of light reaching the sensor when you are increasing shutter speed for one step. If you decrease shutter speed one step, it'll double the amount of light reaching the sensor. So that's how you can calculate. If your image coming darker, you have to reduce the shutter speed by one step and see that how the exposure is coming. So just for thumb rule, whenever you have a handheld photography, like you don't have tripod, you need to carry your camera in hand, then you need to have your shutter speed around the focal length of the lens. So just for example, if you are having 50 mm lens, you should use shutter speed equal to or faster than 1/50. There is no shutter speed like 1/50 on the device. You have to have 1/60 of shutter speed. So that's how you can capture the photo look quite static when you are doing handheld photography. Otherwise, if you go to slow shutter speed, exposure will be good, but you will see that image looking quite in motion, or blurry photos you will get. So these are just handheld techniques. You can see that how we can hold the camera while we are holding the device on the hands, and it can still give you better results even on the we can say one stop or two stop low shutter speed, even without image stabilization. This is a knee bend technique, where we can say that using our knee as a platform to rest our elbows and hold the camera. Elbow plant is something we find some objects around us. It could be a shelf, anything somewhere, something around where we can place our elbow while we are standing. T-Rex is something orthodox, so point and shoot camera. Most of the time we use in this mode, but you can still manage it by holding the camera and keeping your elbow near to the body. So as long as you are having your elbow near to the body, you will feel more stable with your camera on the hand. And the start strap is something interesting. You can have a strap right on the neck and stretch it. Just make it quite stiff, so there will be less movement when you click the shutter release button. Now we'll talk about aperture. So the aperture is f-stop. When we heard about aperture information anywhere on the internet or see other tutorials, we'll heard about f-stop. So when we heard about f-stop, we are talking about aperture, and it controls the amount of light reaching the sensor through the lens. Aperture size we can regulate, and by changing the values, and it'll impact the depth of field. So we will understand in the coming slides what is depth of field, but here are just few values you can work on for practice. F1.4, something around, it'll create good bokeh effect. Bokeh is something circles in the background for blurry objects, especially if you have lighter elements in the background and you're working on a low f number, large aperture. When it's wide open, you will see in the low light, it's creating good bokeh effect for the lights behind. f2.8 to f5.6. It's good for portrait photography, and even for the sports, you can work with this aperture value. And portrait photography, there is a we can say the depth of field thumb rule you can have, where you need to calculate it, your depth of field, something which will enough to cover human face. So when we are capturing human face or even the living subject, we always focus on the eye, just to make sure something in front of the eyes and behind the eyes will be in focus. Like for example, human face size will be somewhere around 6 inches from nose to ears. So if you are having a depth of field somewhere around 6 inches, which we mostly get some on f5.6, depends on the distance also, because depth of field is something which regulates distance, your aperture. We'll just have some more details in the coming slides. Just giving you a brief idea on that you should calculate your depth of field should be enough to capture human face. You have to just adjust your distance and the aperture. f8 to f16, good for landscape, to get increased depth of field. So when we are capturing landscape photos, so we just want to make sure anything in the picture should be visible enough that we can identify what is that. So when you are an f16, anything in the miles away, you can identify if it's a building or it's a mountain. So that's how effective it is. f16 to f32, good for long exposure, creates starburst effect with small focal length. So if you have 50 mm lens, you can practice it at f16, and your shutter speed 1 second, 2 second, you can work on the street lights and you will see that magic starburst effect will comes up. So that's how you can see in the practicals. So now we'll just talk about depth of field in detail. So distance in front of and behind the focus point that appears to be in the focus is referred to as depth of field. So if you see the image here, the focus is right in the middle box. So some boxes behind, some in front are out of focus. So this is the shallow depth of field. We get this at small f number when we have large aperture. So you can see that it's wide open. So when it's wide open, the lens, it'll give you shallow depth of field. Large f number, small aperture. So you can see that hole is quite small. So we can say it's preventing light to reach the sensor, but at the same time, it's allowing you to focus on everything. So it's increasing the depth of field. So you can see that boxes behind and in front all are in focus. So based on the light condition, you have to work on that. So what is your requirement? So if you want to work with large f numbers, small aperture, either you can have a artificial lighting or you have to have good lighting outside, so around sunny days. So now we'll just talk about this few the values what we have in the aperture. And the dial button, again, it's from Nikon. You can see it's on A. It means aperture. F numbers, it can be as low as 1.4. So it depends on the lens again. So what aperture is supported by your lens, it's written on the lens itself. You can see that what is the aperture, the maximum, minimum. Sometime on the zoom lenses will have it'll show you that it's between 4.5 to 5.6. So at the smallest or at the lowest focal length, it'll give you 4.5 of aperture. At the highest focal length, it will give you 5.6 of aperture. But on prime lenses, you can see that it's showing single value. So for example, we have portrait lenses with f1.4, f1.8. So it means at all that at the prime level, on the prime lens, you can work on f1.4, f1.8. So it's the same. Even on some other lenses, you will find the same kind of value on the macro lenses itself. So as low as 1.4 f number, or as high as f32. So when we see these numbers, we also notify these numbers as a very large aperture when it is on f1.4. f2.8 is, we call it as a from where that large aperture starts. f5.6 to f8. F5.6, it will be called as aperture, and again it's going to increase to f8, so we are increasing it by one step. So when you increase your aperture one step, it is going to block the light. So it's half the light. It makes that light half to reach the sensor. So that's how it stops. So if you see that you are in a low light conditions where you are struggling with the light, you have to have a large aperture. So to compensate that, to allow more light reaching the sensor. F11 is, we call it as a small aperture, and F22 is very small aperture, where it's a kind of where diffraction starts visible in your images. So diffraction is something, your image will not be looking sharp even if you have everything is perfect, still your subject is still, you are on the tripod, even if light is good, so everything is perfect, but still you are on F22, you will see that it's showing kind of you can say that shaky or the blurry, that it will not look sharp. So that's the diffraction something. It'll look some we can say that blurriness effect on that image, kind of look. You can test it. So this is a symbol that small depth of field, image will be lighter if you go on the lower f number. If you go on the higher f number, it will give you large depth of field, but image will be darker. ISO sensitivity. ISO sensitivity is a measure of the camera's ability to capture the lights. So it's a camera's ability to capture the light, but we can control it through the ISO, and it increased the sensitivity for the camera to see more light or sense more light. So how it will do, we'll just try to understand. Digital cameras converts the light that falls on the image sensor into electrical signals for processing. So because it's a digital camera, it's work on the based on that you can say that electronic signals, and it converts the lights into electrical signals for processing. So that's how it processes the light. ISO sensitivity is raised by amplifying the signal. So it's just amplifying all the signals, so it can sense more light. In other words, if ISO sensitivity is raised from 100 to 200, while aperture is left unchanged, we'll see in practicals, I'll show you in the simulator, the same exposure can be achieved with a shutter speed twice as fast. So you will see in example that if we increase that ISO, when we are in aperture priority, you will see that shutter speed is getting higher. So that's how we get handheld shutter speed even when we are in the low light. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can choose faster shutter speed and reduce camera blur. This is why people say ISO sensitivity should be raised if lighting is poor. So you should raise ISO only when it is required, when it is in demand, that you are getting a low light, the camera is not giving you shutter speed, which can be good for handheld photography. You can increase ISO and you will see that light is improving. You are getting good desired shutter speed and image is coming in good quality. No flash, low light photography. So when you are working in a low light conditions and you are not using flash, you have to have a higher number of ISO. When lighting is poor, you can use the flash to light portrait subject. Flash units, however, have limited range. So all the flash units have limited range. You need to be very careful that what flash you have and what is the range it can cover. Some basic flash will have their range somewhere around 20 feet. Some good advanced flash, you will have their range around 40 feet. So that is something you need to look into, that you can say that manual of that flash, that what is that range. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can optimally expose both the portrait subject and the background without using flash at all. So if you see the image here, image on the left is taken with the flash. You can see the background is quite dark because the flash is having limited range to reach the subject. And image on the right is captured without flash and with high ISO sensitivity. So you can see that ambient light in the background also captured. So that's how you can take it in your advantage. But again, it's all up to you that what kind of result you want to see. You are comfortable with the flash photography, or you want a high ISO to capture all the ambient light. And now we'll just try to understand what is that noise. So you must have heard this term noise or grainy effect in the photos when you are using high ISO. Raising ISO sensitivity allows faster shutter speeds, reducing blur caused by the subject or camera movement. But in fact, raising ISO sensitivity can introduce a type of image artifact known as the noise. So that grainy effect, we call it as a noise into your photographs, making them look grainy. Raising ISO sensitivity amplifies the electrical signals, which also amplifies any noise in the signal. As a result, the higher the ISO sensitivity, the more obvious the effects of noise on your photographs. So it's very critical that what kind of photography you are doing, and you have to deal with that ISO accordingly. The same is true for all digital cameras. We recommend that you raise ISO sensitivity only as high as needed to avoid blur. So that's just thumb rule for ISO. Raise the ISO only till the point when you get the desired shutter speeds to 400. That's something you need to take care. So if you see the image here, the portion with the 12,800 ISO, it looks very grainy, and at the ISO 100, image looks quite clean. So ISO sensitivity can be set manually by the photographer or automatically by the camera. So there is an auto ISO settings available in all the SLRs. Nikon will have some more customized settings for the auto ISO, where you can set your minimum shutter speed, that how low it can go, even if light is not coming good, even at that your ISO settings, which you have limited, because we can limit the ISO also, that how maximum it can go. In the Nikon, there are advanced setting for auto ISO. So now just have a look at that simulator. So this is the simulator. It's online free simulator. You can always visit this site, and you can try out different combinations. Okay, let's start with the shooting mode with the shutter priority. So when we say shutter priority means we can only control shutter speed. So if you change shutter speed, you can see that if I go to shutter speed of 1/8, I can have my aperture on f22 to get balanced exposure. So you can see that exposure meter. This is the light meter, what we see in the manual mode, and how the exposure will come. Exposure will be in the balance when it's right in the middle. So we can get balanced exposure when we are at f22, because when we are in shutter priority or aperture priority, these are semi modes. So semi modes are designed to give you optimum exposure every time, irrespective whatever the light condition. It can give you blurry image when you are in low light condition, because camera may try to lower the shutter speed to get the balance exposure when you are in aperture priority. But this is something camera will control. Camera will try to make sure that you will get good exposure. And if you see the shutter speed, if I change shutter speed to 1/250, aperture will automatically change to f4. So that's how it's controlled. But if you change ISO at the same time, if you see it's ISO is at 50. So if I change ISO to 200, I'll get aperture f8. So again, so what aperture we need? So just imagine you're in a dark light condition and your aperture is getting really low, which you don't want. Like it's too shallow for to cover your subject. So you have to increase the aperture, but you have to maintain your shutter speed. So what you can do, you can increase the ISO. it'll allow you to have your aperture on your desired, we can say that value what you need for that shot. And likewise, if you are in the aperture priority, so you can see only one aspect is available, option component is enabled or allowed to change is aperture. So we can change the aperture only. And if you notice on the f8 I have shutter speed of 1/60, but if I need a shutter speed of 1/250, what I need to do, I can lower the aperture. So on f4 I'll get shutter speed of 250. So for example, if you need f11 aperture and your shutter speed is 1/30, but you need a shutter speed of 250, how you will get that? So you have to increase your ISO level. So at 400 ISO with f11, I'll get my shutter speed of 1/250. That's how you can balance the exposure with the help of ISO. But when we are in the manual mode, you have all these settings enabled. You can customize it. So just for example, at the f8, if I increase shutter speed, you can see the exposure getting darker. So just see that exposure meter, it's going further darker. And to balance it out, I need to open the aperture. So that's how I get balance exposure. Just imagine if you are doing a portrait photography outside and you are seeing that your image is getting overexposed. So what you can do, you can increase the shutter speed and you will get the desired result for the exposure. And if you want high shutter speed with f11, an image will get darker again, you can increase the ISO. So you can see on the ISO 800, it's giving me the balance exposure, but image will be having a lot of noise. So ISO effect or the grainy effect depends on the device also. Entry-level device may give you more grainy effect compared to semi-pro or professional devices. So you need to test it out. You just take your subject in the same light condition, capture images at different ISO. I should say in the low light condition, you should try in the we can say the different light condition. If you use your ISO at different levels, you will see the results and you will have more confidence on using ISO. Okay, now we'll just talk about the composition technique. So starting this online session, I'm going to use one of the composition techniques from the 24 in total list I have. I have total 24 composition techniques, what I prepared. And in all the sessions every month, I'm going to share new composition techniques. So this from starting today, or from the first my online session for photography introduction, I'm going to start with the rule of thirds, and I'm going to cover all the composition techniques in coming months, one by one. So rule of thirds. So this is one of the most talked about composition techniques, because when we start photography, we always go through the composition techniques, and rule of third is something which always come into our mind. Even on the LCD screen, when you press info button on the DSLR device, you will see at one point you will have one kind of grid on your LCD. So that's something manufacturers helping you to plan your composition right on the device. But you can compose it in the post-processing. You can have different editing softwares where you will have overlay effect of rule of third, or when you are cropping, you will see that grid lines. You can compose your shots. So what is rule of third? We'll just try to understand. All you need to divide your frame in vertically and horizontally into 3 equal parts. So it's dividing the frame vertically and horizontally into 3 equal parts, and you will see that 9 parts created. and the lines are crossing each other. So these points, we call it as the intersection points. So this is something treated as a interesting points in our frame. So whenever you are placing your subject, keep the subject around those intersection points. So rule of thirds, most of the times, example, if you search on the Google, you will see images where subject will be on the half portion of the frame. Like in this photo, you can see it's having more empty space on one end and less empty space on the other end. So that's how we identify the photo, and we can see that it's a rule of third applied here. By placing the subject on one of the four points where these dividing line meets, you will encourage the viewer away from the center of the image. So scientifically, when we see any image, we always try to read through the images from the corners. And when we have our subject placed right on rule of third, we help viewer to identify the subject or to go through the subject without deviating their viewing, we can say, the vision on that photo. This forces them to look around the image and makes your composition more interesting, because we are reading through the corners, and if you have your subject placed on those intersection points, they'll start through the corners. So that's how the balance it will look on the image. You can capture a photo where rule of third followed and where the same composition or the same subject where rule of third not followed. So you can feel that how it looks to the eyes. So just a couple of example I have. This is food photography. I have some elements and the subject and its advertising style. So you can see the my interesting points I've used here for the background, for the food elements you can see, and all the elements what I'm using here, I just try to place it around intersection points. So this is one of other example where I have action composition, I have objects behind, I have subject in front, and it's quite complex visual because it's action photos and a lot of things going on into the frame, but it's a rule of third which is helping me to define what are the interesting points we have here. So all these are interesting points you can see here. What I try to show, the biscuit and the cookies, what you see in the how that it's melting down, and there was one dice in there. So this was something unique I was trying with my composition. Instead of a sugar cube, I tried with the dice, just to try something different and unique. The splash is interesting. You can say that part of this image, and the background, the elements in the background, giving a kind of a vintage kitchen-like a feel. Okay, so we have summed up, and these are my upcoming the workshop I have. If you are in Pune, nearby Pune, you can always get in touch with me in those workshops. I try to do every month, so mostly I'll plan something in the next month, and from March onwards, I'll try to publish my calendar for the full year. But these are the workshops which I'm really looking for right now. And tomorrow I have a street photography workshop in Pune. It's in the Monday market. It's a fruit and vegetable and flower market, which I comprise in that workshop. On 28th and 29th, I have birds photography and nature photography workshop, and they all are in Pune. I have photography tour also planned, so I'm just looking out to make good group of photographers which can who can travel with me at least in India in different parts. So you will see I am going to plan coming words different photography tours in different part of this country. So hopefully you will see the different kind of flavors in the photographies I'm going to do in coming months. So this one is for big one. I plan for February 25th and 26th. It's a couple of days tour. So now we are into the Q&A session. So you can unmute yourself, and if you have anything to be discussed, the point which we have learned here or something outside, maybe you have some questions around photography which you want to discuss, I'll try my best to help you out.
Hello, so
Yeah.
hello.
Yes, I can hear.
You can hear me, right? This is Sundar here. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, and it was nice, speaking to you. And
Thank you.
I have a list of queries related with your presentation, and and let me start with the burst mode. You were speaking about the burst mode, right? And
Yes.
you're talking about the difference between, when you're talking about the difference between mirrorless and DSLR, you pointed out the burst mode, right? So
Yes.
I understand that in DSLR camera, if you pick burst mode, you can take 6 or 7 numbers of photos, whereas in mirrorless you'll be having more number of photos in the burst mode. That's what you try to mean, right?
No. Let me clear it more.
Continuous photos.
It'll take continuous photo. Like for example, in the Nikon, it can take 10 photos in the burst mode. So out of 10, it'll be somewhere around 6 photos you will see coming in good quality, or in the sharp images. Focus will be accurate in those 6 photos. In the DSLR I'm talking about. But when you have Nikon mirrorless camera, that average, we can say the probability will increase from 6 to somewhere around 8 or 9. So 8 or 9 images will be in good focus. So that's the enhancement we have.
Enhanced. So it is something related to the image quality then.
Focusing system has been, we can say, has been improved or redesigned for mirrorless camera. It works on contrast detection. That is something helping in that burst mode.
Okay, thanks. And the next one is about the image stabilization. So I could see that this image stabilization will be, it would be coming with the lens, right, or not with the camera, right? And this is one of
there are devices. There are option in the device also.
Okay.
There are devices where it supports image stabilization, but nowadays we have this option in the lenses itself.
Okay, in the lens itself. Okay.
Yes, in the lens itself. So most of the time you will see that macro lenses or zoom lenses will have that option.
Okay, clear. So, but if you buy any budget DSLR camera, will you find this image stabilization with the body of the camera?
No.
No, right? So it will be available only in the advanced cameras, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, clear. Okay.
But you can check that what is your budget, if in that budget device is having advanced.
Okay, clear.
Yeah.
So for low light situations, which one would be better? Is it DSLR or mirrorless?
As I said, DSLR having a larger camera sensor.
So
the more the sensor size will be larger, it will allow more light to sense.
More light.
Okay. So it's quite the same example when we talk about that ISO. We are enhancing the capability of the camera to sense more light. But if it's having lesser space to sense light, like the small sensor, even if you raise the ISO, it will having the lesser capability compared to the camera which is having a large sensor.
Large sensor. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So it's having more space. Yeah.
More area, right? That's it.
More area to cover.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Clear. So there is one more thing I want to check. It is it's about the light painting. You mentioned something, the light painting, which I couldn't get. I couldn't get the content of what you were trying to.
The seconds. I was just explaining that if you are going to paint a subject, your time will be defined. The exposure time will be defined by what is the size of subject. If you are capturing an apple.
Okay.
Just for example, if you're capturing an apple, to paint an apple, you need somewhere around 3-4 seconds.
Okay.
But if you are capturing we can say the vase, a flower vase you are capturing, so you have to travel a lot.
Okay.
So that travel time is calculated. So it demands a lot of practice. and you will identify that what is the time required to cover complete. So you're painting a subject. So it's very interesting element of photography, light painting, but it demands a lot of effort. And I've tested it. When I started learning it, I tried with the onion.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it was very good experience for me, because to capture that onion, all the parts, it was really fun. I was struggling initially, but
Okay.
fortunately I managed to
Okay.
capture that onion with the light painting. And when it complete the capture, it looks like it was hand painted. So I got compliment on that photo. That photo looked
Okay.
like a hand
Okay.
painted. So
Hand painted.
that's,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
That
that's
kind
the
of
magic.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of that kind of thing you can make it even using the DSLR camera, right?
Yes,
Even
yes,
you can
yes.
take the pictures from
That's technique.
DSLRs.
That technique don't depend on the DSLR or the mirrorless. That is
Okay.
artistic way of photography, and
Okay.
you can use
Artistic
any
photography.
kind of camera for that, which
Okay.
supports
Okay.
long exposure, the exposure time where you can control on any device. You can do that experiment.
Okay, but it's all about playing with these three factors, right? The expo, I
Yes.
mean, the shutter speed, aperture, and the ISO. Even for
Yes,
this
these
light
are
paint
the exposure triangle,
photography.
and these are the components which decides that how the exposure will be. Anytime you see that image getting brighter or exposure getting low, underexposed, so image getting darker, so you can play with these factors to balance the exposure based on the requirements. If your priority is shutter speed, so you will have a desired shutter speed. You can't change any further. So
Okay.
what else left? The aperture left, ISO left.
Yeah.
And if you have shutter speed set, aperture also you have decided that this will be my aperture. So the only thing left is the ISO. Either you
ISO.
wait for the light to come out as a good condition, optimal light condition.
Okay.
In photography, we say either we have to wait for the optimal light condition or we have to work on the ISO.
Okay.
It's up to you. So I always advise to, if you want to improve your photography, work around the sunset and sunrise time, 2 hours.
Sunset and sunrise times.
So
Okay.
2 hours of investment, you will see a lot of things improvement in your photography.
Okay. Okay. Okay, clear. And one more request, is it possible for you to show me that photograph, which which you mentioned, when you took the onion photo, which for that light painting, the light for the light painting, you mentioned that you have tried something with the onion and then it was
Okay, you want to see that onion photo?
yeah, just out of interest, I'm asking.
Let me search. It was a test
problem
photo.
if it is.
So I didn't publish. It's in my personal repository.
Okay. I got it. It's up to you. It's your personal essay,
Yeah.
but just want to see you.
Okay, no problem. No problem. You just
okay.
send me email for
Okay,
that.
sure.
I'll definitely share with you. I usually don't share test photos on social media.
Okay. Got it. No problem.
Yeah.
So I can send an email to info@smithphotowell.com. Is it the right one? Or okay.
Yes, this is
okay. I will get in touch with you. This email.
Sure.
All right. Thanks for all your support.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always nice. I'm struggling to have more interactive sessions. So this is something I'm looking for. Even one participants, if he's more interactive during the session, I'll feel more, we can say satisfied with this kind of online sessions. So
absolutely.
I always say to have more interactive sessions because that's how we learn.
Exactly. You're right.
Yeah, so next time when you join, just to make sure you have some questions ready. And during the session also we'll discuss. So it'll be more clear. Okay, sure. Yeah. I do. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay. Mani, you have any question?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Most welcome. I hope you enjoyed this.
Yes, sir. It was a nice session.
Yeah. Thank you. So coming months, I'm going to launch my complete full-fledged basic photography online session. So that will be 3 hours session. And I'm going to cover all the aspects, whatever I was covering before. because this is the introduction session just to cover the exposure triangle and the composition technique. But the complete, we can say, the course will include all the aspects of photography. And my aim is just to draft a session like that, even if you buy a camera today and after the session, you will feel more comfortable and you will get above average work with your DSLR camera. So this is the kind of motive I have, or the aim I have for my workshop. So I hope it will be helpful, but most probably it will be the last week of Feb, or from starting March, I'm going to launch that session. I am sure that that will be more than helpful for all the new photographers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sumit, thanks for the
Okay.
information.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye-bye.